Hello, everyone, and welcome to Soft Stories. I'm Stratton, and today we are going to be continuing our reading of the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius. I hope you all have been enjoying these reflections as much as I have. As I mentioned in the earlier parts, when I read this book for the first time at university, it had a tremendous impact on me, and I feel like my current worldview has a lot to thank Marcus Aurelius for. So, without further ado, let us continue our reading of the Meditations with Book 3, which begins thusly. Written in Carnuntum. We must take into our reckoning not only that life is expended day by day, and the remaining balance diminishes, but also this further consideration. If we live longer, there is no guarantee that our mind will likewise retain that power to comprehend and study the world, which contributes to our experience of things divine and human. If dementia sets in, there will be no failure of such faculties as breathing, feeding, imagination, desire. Before these go, the earlier extinction is of one's proper use of oneself, one's accurate assessment of the gradations of duty, one's ability to analyze impressions, one's understanding of whether the time has come to leave this life. These and all other matters which wholly depend on trained calculation. So, we must have a sense of urgency, not only for the ever closer approach of death, but also because our comprehension of the world and our ability to pay proper attention will fade before we do. We should also attend to things like these, observing that even the incidental efforts of the processes of nature have their own charm and attraction. Take the baking of bread. The loaf splits open here and there, and those very cracks, in one way, the failure of the baker's profession, somehow catch the eye and give particular stimulus to our appetite. Figs, likewise, burst open at full maturity, and in olives ripened on the tree, the very proximity of decay lends a special beauty to the fruit. Similarly, the ears of corn nodding down to the ground, the lion's puckered brow, the foam gushing from the boar's mouth, and much else besides. Looked at in isolation, these things are far from lovely, but their consequence on the processes of nature enhances them and gives them attraction. So any man with a feeling and deeper insight for the workings of the whole will find some pleasure in almost every aspect of their disposition, including the incidental consequences. Such a man will take no less delight in the living snarl of wild animals than in all the imitative representations of painters and sculptors. He will see a kind of bloom and fresh beauty in an old woman or an old man, and he will be able to look with sober eyes on the seductive charm of his own slave boys. Not all can share this conviction. Only one who has developed a genuine affinity for nature and her works. For him, there will be many such perceptions. Hippocrates cured many diseases, then died of disease himself. The Chaldean astrologers foretold the deaths of many people, and then their own fated day claimed them. Alexander, Pompey, Julius Caesar annihilated whole cities time after time, and slaughtered tens of thousands of horse and foot in the field of battle. And yet the moment came for them too to depart this life. Heraclitus speculated long on the conflagration of the universe, but the water of dropsy filled his guts, and he died, caked in a poultice of cow dung. Vermin were the death of Democritus, and vermin of another sort killed Socrates. What of it, then? You embarked, you set sail, you made port. Go ashore now. If it is to another life, nothing is empty of the gods, even on that shore. And if to insensibility, you will cease to suffer pains and pleasures, no longer enthralled to a bodily vessel which is a master as far inferior as its servant is superior. One is mind and divinity, the other a clay of dust and blood. Do not waste the remaining part of your life in thoughts about other people when you are not thinking with reference to some aspect of the common good. Why deprive yourself of the time for some other task? I mean, thinking about what so-and-so is doing and why, and what he is saying, or contemplating, or plotting, and all that line of thought makes you stray from the close watch on your own directing mind. No, in the sequence of thoughts you must avoid all that is casual or aimless, and most particularly anything prying or malicious. Train yourself to think only those thoughts such that in answer to the sudden question, "What's in your mind now?" you could say, with immediate frankness, whatever it is, this or that, and so your answer can give direct evidence that all your thoughts are straightforward and kindly. The thoughts of a social being who has no regard for the fancies of pleasure or wider indulgence, for rivalry, malice, suspicion, or anything else that one would blush to admit was in one's mind. A man such as this, if he postpones no longer his ready place among the best, is in some way a priest and minister of the gods. He responds to the divinity seated within him, and this renders the man unsullied by pleasures, unscathed by any pain, untouched by any wrong, unconscious of any wickedness, a wrestler for the greatest prize of all, to avoid being thrown by any passion, dyed to the core with justice, embracing with his whole heart all the experience allotted to him, rarely, and only when there is great need for the common good, wondering what others may be saying, or doing, or thinking. He has only his own work to bring to fulfillment, and only his own fated allocation from the whole to claim his constant attention. As for his work, he makes it excellent. As for his lot, he is convinced that it is good. And each person's appointed lot is both his fellow passenger and his driver. He bears in mind, too, the kinship of all rational beings, and that caring for all men is in accordance with man's nature, but that nevertheless he should not hold to the opinions of all, but only of those who live their lives in agreement with nature. He will consistently remind himself what sort of people they are who do not lead such lives, what they are like, both at home and abroad, by night and by day, they and the polluting company they keep. So he disregards even the praise of such men. These are the people who are not even satisfied with themselves. You should take no action unwillingly, selfishly, uncritically, or with conflicting motives. Do not dress up your thoughts in smart finery. Do not be a gabbler or a meddler. Further, let the God that is within you be the champion of the being that you are, a male, mature in years, a statesman, a Roman, a ruler, one who has taken his post like a soldier waiting for the retreat from life to sound, and ready to depart, past the need for any loyal oath or human witness, and see that you keep a cheerful demeanour, and retain your independence of outside help, and the peace which others can give. Your duty is to stand straight, not be held straight. If you discover in human life something better than justice, truth, self-control, courage, in short, something better than the self-sufficiency of your own mind, which keeps you acting in accord with the true reason, and accepts your inheritance of fate in all outside of your choice. If, as I say, you can see something better than this, then turn to it with all your heart, and enjoy this prime good you have found. But if nothing is shown to be better than the very God that is seated in you, which has brought all your own impulses under its control, which scrutinizes your thoughts, which has withdrawn itself, as Socrates used to say, from all inducements of the senses, which has subordinated itself to the gods and takes care for men. If you find all else by comparison with this small and paltry, then give no room to anything else. Once turned and inclined to any alternative, you will struggle thereafter to restore the primacy of that good which is yours, and yours alone. Because it is not right that the rational and social good should be rivaled by anything of a different order. For example, the praise of the many, or power, or wealth, or the enjoyment of pleasure. All these things may seem to suit for a little while, but they can suddenly take control and carry you away. So you, I repeat, must simply and freely choose the better and hold to it. But better is what benefits. If to your benefit as a rational being, adopt it. But if simply to your benefit as an animal, reject it, and stick to your judgment without fanfare. Only make sure that your scrutiny is sound. Never regard as a benefit to yourself anything which will force you at some point to break your faith, to leave integrity behind, to hate, suspect, or curse another, to dissemble, to covet anything needing the secrecy of walls and drapes. A man who has put first his own mind and divinity, and worships the supremacy of the God within him, makes no drama of his life, no hand-wringing, no craving for solitude or crowds. Most of all, his will be a life of neither pursuit nor avoidance, and it is of no remote concern to him whether he will retain the body envelope of his soul for a longer or a shorter time. Even if release must come here and now, he will depart as easily as he would perform any other act that admits of integrity and decency. Throughout all his life, his one precaution is that his mind should not shift to a state without affinity, to a rational and social being. In the mind of one who is chastened and cleansed, you will find no suppuration, no simmering ulcer, no sore festering under the skin. Fate does not catch him with his life unfulfilled, as one might speak of an actor leaving the stage before his part is finished and the play is over. Moreover, you will find nothing servile or pretentious, no dependence or alienation, nothing to answer for, no lurking fault. Revere your power of judgment. All rests on this to make sure that your directing mind no longer entertains any judgment which fails to agree with the nature or the constitution of a rational being. And this state guarantees deliberate thought, affinity with other men, and obedience to the gods. So discard all else, and secure these few things only. Remind yourself, too, that each of us lives only in the present moment, a mere fragment of time. The rest is life past or uncertain future. Sure, life is a small thing, and small the cranny of the earth in which we live it. Small, too, even the longest fame thereafter, which is itself subject to a succession of little men who will die quickly, and have no knowledge even of themselves, let alone of those long dead. One addition to the precepts already mentioned. Always make a definition or sketch of what presents itself to your mind, so you can see it stripped bare to its essential nature and identify it clearly, in whole and in all its parts, and can tell yourself its proper name, and the names of those elements of which it is compounded, and into which it will be dissolved. Nothing is so conducive to greatness of mind as the ability to subject each element of our experience in life to methodical and truthful examination, always at the same time using this scrutiny as a means to reflect on the nature of the universe. The contribution of any given action or event makes to that nature, the value this has for the whole, and the value it has for man. And man is an inhabitant of this highest city, of which all other cities are mere households. Ask, then, what is this which is now making its impression on me? What is it composed of? How long in the nature of things will it last? What virtue is needed to meet it? Gentleness, for example, or courage, truthfulness, loyalty, simplicity, self-sufficiency, and so on. So in each case we must say, this has come from God. This is due to a juncture of fate, the mesh of destiny, or some similar coincidence of chance. And this is from my fellow man, my kinsman and colleague, though one who does not know what accords with his own nature. But I do know, and so I treat him kindly and fairly, following the natural law of our fellowship, but at the same time I aim to give him his proper desert in matters which are morally neutral. If you set yourself to your present task along the path of true reason, with all determination, vigour, and goodwill, if you admit no distraction, but keep your own divinity pure and standing strong, as if you had to surrender it right now, if you grapple this to you, expecting nothing, shirking nothing, but self-content with each present action taken in accordance with nature, and a heroic truthfulness in all that you say and mean, then you will lead a good life, and nobody is able to stop you. Just as doctors have their instruments and knives at hand for any emergency treatment, so you should have your doctrines ready for the recognition of the divine and the human, and the performance of every action, even the smallest, in consciousness of the bond which unites the two. No action in the human context will succeed without reference to the divine, nor vice versa. No more wandering. You are not likely to read your own jottings, your histories of the ancient Greeks and Romans, your extracts from their literature laid up for your old age. Hurry then to the end. Abandon vain hopes. Rescue yourself, if you have any care for yourself, while the opportunity is still there. They do not know all the meanings of theft, of sowing, of buying, of keeping at rest, of seeing what needs to be done. This is not for the eye, but for a very different sort of vision. body, soul, mind. To the body belong sense perceptions, to the soul impulses, to the mind judgments. The receipt of sense impressions is shared with cattle. Response to the puppet strings of impulse is shared with wild beasts, with calamities, with Phalaris or Nero. Having the mind as guide to what appears appropriate action is shared with those who do not believe in the gods, those who betray their country, those who get up to anything behind closed doors. So, if all else is held in common with the categories mentioned above, it follows that the defining characteristic of the good person is to love and embrace whatever happens to him along this thread of fate, and not to pollute the divinity which is seated within his breast, or trouble it with a welter of confused impressions, but to preserve its constant favour, in proper allegiance to God, saying only what is true, doing only what is just. And if all people mistrust him for living a simple, decent, and cheerful life, he has no quarrel with any of them, and no diversion from the road which leads to the final goal of his life. To this he must come pure, at peace, ready to depart, in unforced harmony with his fate. And that ends Book 4 of the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius. In this book, Marcus spells out one of the main points of the book that I take away from it. The idea that things external to oneself, one's own internal and private divinity, which is what Marcus seems to mean when he refers to the divine. He's talking less about external gods and more about our perfect internal natures that we can choose to follow, to worship, or to ignore. That everything outside of these own internal processes, the body, the soul, and the mind, are outside of our control, and it is our response to those external events and sensory inputs that really matters. That is something that I think about every single day. No matter how bad of a day it seems to have been, the only thing I can control is my response to it, and the way that I look upon life in the present moment. And sometimes it's hard. Sometimes you just want to sit down and wallow for a while. But other times, it's so incredibly helpful to be able to put things into perspective, think about what it is out there that I can truly control, what we as individuals can truly control in our lives, and to let everything else go. For it is the finished past or the uncertain future. Thank you so much for joining me today on Soft Stories. I can't wait to join with you again when we continue our reading of the Meditations, but until that time, I wish you all the best, and goodbye.